So let's dive into the baits and how we dissect these docks. Really, I put these baits in 3 categories. You've got a wacky worm, your favorite weightless soft plastic stick worm, a swim bait. Now there's a big range of swim baits, but a swim bait, and then some sort of bladed bait. And when I say bladed bait, I mean chatterbait / spinner bait. Depending on conditions, time of year, will depend on you know, what baits you use in each of those categories. But 3-prong approach to the docks. Really, the soft plastic stick worm, wacky worm, that's pretty straightforward. It is what it is. Googan baits, lunker log on a, you know, just on a straight shank, rebarb hook. That's the first bait in the category of its own. So let's move into the swim baits. This can be a pretty wide variation of sizes and applications, but let's start small. Here we got a 3.3 Googan saucy swimmer. I'm going to use these if the water's a lot clearer, usually pre-spawn or winter time. In transition into the winter, fish are feeding on a little bit smaller bait. They're a little more finicky. They're looking for an easier meal, or for somewhere with really clear water. And a lot of times I'm fishing this down the floats on floating structured docks. So you see behind us, we got these floats here. We're gonna make long casts down these houseboat floats and wind it high. And also, another very important part, you're wanting to use a very light head for these. No more than a quarter, probably more like a 3/16 size head, because you're not trying to get this down super deep, unless you're looking at your forward sonar and you see them hanging deeper off the ends or something. Sometimes they'll school up off the ends of docks, while you always got to keep your head down looking at that forward sonar. But when you're fishing along these floats, these fish are using those floats as an ambush point to feed. So you're wanting to keep that bait somewhat in the zone of that float, because that's where they're going to be sitting. You're going to want to keep it in the strike zone as long as possible. So that's the finesse swimmer. All right, guys, next in the swim bait category, jumping from, you know, finesse all the way up to the Big Daddy. This is what I'm reaching for when in the spring. Post-spawn especially, fish are healing up. They're looking for that big meal. They're trying to feed back up after the spawn, and that's when they're eating really big baits. This here is a 7-inch Bass Mafia dangerous swim bait. I particularly here made it a line through, but coming soon is the loaded version. It'll be a top hook line through, which is going to be absolute money for skipping around docks, skipping around floats. It's going to allow you to fish it around all this cover very efficiently. But they really bite this thing. They'll bite it pre-spawn, but it really shines just after the spawn, post-spawn time. Next, we got what I call swim jig swim bait. That's the other variation of swim bait I use around docks. The reason I like this so much is when you get in a lot of these gnarly docks where there's a lot of ropes or there's tight places, that's somewhere you can't throw this little open hook finesse swim bait. That's why you need this swim jig swim bait. It's got this weed guard here. It's going to allow you to fish it in and around, you know, cross members, ropes, cables. It allows you to skip it really well. It's just a very, very versatile bait that's a little more subtle than a spinner bait or chatterbait. That takes us into our next style of baits around the docks, and that is a bladed bait. You either got a bladed jig or a spinner bait, falls into that category. When the water is dirty and, you know, I don't need to skip it. If we have a lot of open slips and we have a lot of stained water, that's when I'm going to reach for that spinner bait. However, if the water's a touch cleaner or pretty much if it requires skipping, that's when I'm reaching for the bladed jig. And a lot of times we're fishing this around poles, and more times than not we're fishing it down these floats like we have behind us here, and trying to catch those fish that are set up on those floats to feed.